Story 1. I'm a paramedic, and it's wild how little we make. People assume we're rolling in cash because, saving lives and all. The truth is, I make about $16 an hour to literally restart someone's heart at 3 a.m. in sketchy situations. Story 2. Literally any job that works with the general public in customer service. Between constantly changing schedules, irregular hours, and constantly increasing expectations for what good customer service is, the stress and frustration that come with these types of jobs are challenging. Not to mention a number of these jobs require people to be on their feet for over 8 hours a day, leading to poor leg circulation. And for some reason, it seems to be taboo for customer service employees to have a visible cup of water in view of anyone. Story 3. In the United States, veterinarians often earn six-figure salaries, but most do not. They still have student loans to pay for, though. Every patient they see is owned by a person who also lives in this economy but still loves their pet, so they sometimes face criticism for being too expensive. Story 4. Librarians, not even the highly specialized ones, but just your average library assistant dealing with troublesome individuals, demanding parents, and unruly children in a public library. Story 5. Emergency services like police, paramedics, and firefighters. Here in the United Kingdom, there are a great deal of train drivers that are paid twice as much as firefighters. Story 6. Wildland firefighting. Smoke jumping, hot shots, rappellers, etc. Edit. Not only is it low, but they are due for up to a $20,000 pay cut in March. Story 7. Pharmacy technicians are required to be licensed and often also certified, both of which are out-of-pocket expenses just to get the job. They prepare all the medications patients receive in the hospital, with potentially disastrous patient outcomes if concentrations are incorrect and not noticed by the pharmacist during checking. They also have to handle hazardous materials, such as chemotherapy or even radiopharmaceuticals, all for the same wage as working at McDonald's, where people's lives aren't at risk if you make a mistake. Story 8. Medical residents. On face value, they make a decent salary, but when accounting for 70 to 80-hour work weeks in the hospital treating patients, it can usually calculate to about minimum wage or possibly less depending on the location. Combine that with sky-high debt, and it can take a financial toll on people. Story 9. Teachers, firefighters, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, home care workers, care partners in hospitals, daycare workers, Starbucks baristas, forest rangers, agricultural field workers, car wash workers, gardeners, some housekeepers, fire lookouts, Sherpas. Story 10. Machinists. I had an interest in switching trades a couple of years back and couldn't believe that most machinists make high teens to low 20s per hour. For such a precision job, I didn't expect them to make the same as the laborers we hire that just move garbage or dig holes. Story 11. Teachers. We end up spending a good chunk of our own money setting up our classrooms and working extra hours because we never have enough time to get things like setting up labs and grading done during our preparation periods. In my city, I made less per hour than a fast food worker for the number of hours I worked. Story 12. Tower climbers. Those videos you see on Facebook where a guy changes a light bulb 1,000 feet up for $20,000 are misleading. Cell carriers like T-Mobile and Verizon have overwhelmed the industry to a point where the people who do incredibly dangerous work every day anywhere from 200 to 2,000 feet in the air make $25 an hour if they're lucky. Think of how essential communications are in our daily lives and you'll realize how absurd this is. Story 13. Paraprofessionals. I work as a special needs coordinator, speech and occupational health, with a patient panel of 90 students. My take-home is around $28,000 per year. Emergency behavioral health technician, 2017. I made $13.50 per hour. In the federal sector, they currently start at $12.50 per hour in the private sector. They generally have to take an annual license test that most employers do not pay for. I am currently applying to work at a hospital as a human services designee, admission and follow-up social care for gerontology, and the pay starts at $28 per hour. Most of these jobs are very emotionally taxing and can sometimes be outright dangerous. Story 14. anyone in the teaching profession or coaching below the Division I college level. I would also like to include retail workers, be it tellers at a bank, the person collecting carts at the Home Depot, or the person selling makeup at Sephora. People are just awful to retail workers these days. Now, I will say that overall customer service has declined compared to the past, but I would also argue that the attitudes with which we enter can often determine the level of service we receive. That being said, retail workers definitely deserve more because people. Story 15. Teachers and nurses. That kind of career path takes a whole lot of courage to take on, considering the modern culture now. I am not a teacher nor a nurse, but they deserve a whole lot more recognition and higher pay. Story 16. Those working on media such as film, television, and games usually rake in so much profit, and it feels like the artists working on them basically get a kick in the balls for a thank you, and no share of the profits for which they are largely responsible. Story 17. Amusing thread. The original poster did say, surprisingly, everyone knows teachers, nurses, and firefighters are underpaid. I'm going to say truck drivers. The amount of sacrifice required to make good money as one is unreal. At the end of the day, every industry requires goods to be moved from point A to point B in order to operate at all. Transport is a vital piece of the modern economy. The amount of pressure from management can be insane. Story 18. Direct support provider for adults with disabilities. You will be responsible for multiple adults, including passing them medications and assisting with personal care, but will be paid barely more than retail. Story 19. It's not surprising, but the Department of Social Services pays you for 40 hours a week, when you really end up working 60 or more hours a week. And if some deranged parent decides to hurt their child or worse, then the entire community blames you. Most caseworkers I know are making around $40,000 a year. This is also in North Carolina. Story 20. I always thought Disney princesses would be paid a lot more than the average cast member, but when my friend finally got a job at Disney, they said the pay for almost all positions is super low. They depend on people who have a deep love of Disney and performing to take the jobs since it is a dream for so many. Story 21. In my opinion, nurses should earn a lot more than they do. They do body-destroying work, on their feet for 12 hours straight, skipping meals. The whole time they're juggling a mental load that would make us hesitant, and a careless moment could kill someone. On top of all that, they're carefully trained to be able to see if something is wrong with you at a glance, which requires very keen eyes and a lot of empathy. Oh, and if your bowels get impacted, guess who's taking care of it? And all of this is in an environment where people are at their worst, the lowest points of their lives when they're hurting, desperate, and in despair. They get punched, sexually harassed, groped, vomited on, spit on, you name it. They have to wrestle violent people down. They take care of violent criminals with the police in the room to try and keep them safe. And through all of that, when it's the middle of the night and you're dying alone, they'll be the one sitting there holding your hand. They'll grieve for you and carry that burden when you're gone. It goes on the pile of people they cared about and lost. None of the things I've listed are supposition. They're just a few of the stories my wife has told me after work. I admire her so much. Story 22. Healthcare support workers make up the majority of staff at most national health service hospitals. All Band 2, making less than people on reception, Band 3. They essentially run most clinics, yet are paid the same as the porters who clean the toilets. Story 23. Childcare workers. Most centers pay minimum wage to take care of up to 10 children at once. Be responsible for their basic care needs, including being cardiopulmonary resuscitation and epinephrine autoinjector trained, and making sure they are actually learning something, documenting proof of this through applications and pictures. It's very sad. Story 24. Anyone not earning a living wage is too low. It's not the answer a lot of people want to hear, but if you are doing a job that is necessary for society and produces 40 hours per week of work, you should be paid at least the minimum required to live in that society. Story 25. This will come as a surprise, but in the United States, general practitioners, pediatricians, and internists, given the amount of education they have, the hours they work, the stress and responsibilities, while they do well, these doctors do not make as much as people would think. Story 26. Anybody in the fashion industry who actually makes the stuff, pattern cutters, sample cutters, machinists, embroiderers, and so on, and then the job gets shipped out to East Asia where they pay even less. Story 27. Just about everything in aviation. The pilots, the crews, the air traffic controllers, the baggage handlers, the gate agents, virtually everything except the Transportation Security Administration and Customs and Border Protection. Story 28. Structural engineer. Doctors have people's lives in their hands, and so does the engineer. A large number of people will use a structure during its life. Yes, doctors get paid much more. Story 29. Anyone behind the counter in a retail environment puts up with more terrible behavior than anyone and is more powerless than any other employee group I can think of. Second behind them would be support staff in a school. You think teachers are paid badly? These people make half that. Story 30. Honestly, just essential workers like paramedics, nurses, police, firefighters, and teachers. Anything that costs the government money. The big salaries are saved for the people who earn money for their employers or the government. Story 31. Medical residency. I know it's made up later, but during residency, doctors work many hours and make a very modest salary. My sister-in-law calculated that she makes less than minimum wage if you calculate it as hourly. It's not uncommon to work 100 hours in some places. Story 32. Veterinary technicians and veterinary assistants have incredibly difficult jobs, especially technicians who also have to be nurses, dental technicians, and anesthesiologists. Yet the average salary hovers around $20 an hour. Plus, everyone complains to the technicians and assistants about how greedy their veterinarians are, when the kicker is the veterinarians aren't even making that much. Private equity guys. Look it up and fight the real fight. Story 33. Can I ask where paramedics are making $17 to $20 per hour? I am a medical consultant and work nationally. Medical assistants make an average of $20 per hour nationally, minus a few states. $20 per hour for an emergency medical technician paramedic sounds wrong. After posting, I Googled it. Apparently, this is the case in some lower cost of living states. Story 34. Working at assisted living homes for the elderly pays pretty low across the board until you get into upper management. Even positions like licensed practical nurse or registered nurse do not make much, especially when compared to what you could be making at a hospital. It is labor-intensive and emotionally demanding work, not to mention the liability of it all. A lot of facilities struggle to keep a full staff because of it. Story 35. Teaching is such an important job, but the expectations are ridiculous. I teach 157 eighth graders, 5 sections of the same thing, day in and day out. It's a wonder I learn names at all, but it's great. Story 36. Allow me to quote Mr. Mark Twain. There are wise people who talk ever so knowingly and complacently about the working classes, and satisfy themselves that a day's hard intellectual work is very much harder than a day's hard manual toil, and is righteously entitled to much bigger pay. Why, they really think that, because they know all about the one but haven't tried the other. But I know all about both, and so far as I am concerned, there isn't money enough in the universe to hire me to swing a pickaxe 30 days, but I will do the hardest kind of intellectual work for just as near nothing as you can cipher it down, and I will be satisfied, too. Intellectual work is misnamed. It is a pleasure, a dissipation, and is its own highest reward. The poorest paid architect, engineer, general, author, sculptor, painter, lecturer, advocate, legislator, actor, preacher, singer is constructively in heaven when he is at work. And as for the musician with the fiddle bow in his hand who sits in the midst of a great orchestra with the ebbing and flowing tides of divine sound washing over him, why, certainly, he is at work, if you wish to call it that, but Lord, it's a sarcasm just the same. The law of work does seem utterly unfair, but there it is, and nothing can change it. The higher the pay and enjoyment the worker gets out of it, the higher shall be his pay in cash also. And it's also the very law of those transparent swindles, transmissible nobility and kingship. Story 37. Just about everyone in mental health apart from medical doctors, doctorates, and licensed therapists. There isn't a more challenging and frankly dangerous field of medicine. But those providers usually fall at the lower end of the medical pay range. Story 38. Teachers. The answer for me is always teachers. They deserve a truckload of cash to be backed up to their bank accounts, and instead they get a K-Cars pittance. Story 39. A lot of healthcare roles are not nurses, doctors, or administrators. I'm talking about paramedics, emergency medical technicians, certified nursing assistants, geriatric nursing assistants, certified medical assistants, phlebotomists, and more. Most require certifications even but pay terribly. Story 40. Para or paraprofessional. Does your child require one-on-one support at school? Do they have ADHD, bipolar disorder, use a wheelchair, or have autism? Schools will hire someone to help. The pay is $12 an hour and they recommend a bachelor's degree. Be aware that this role may involve dealing with challenging behaviors such as being bitten, hit, or stabbed with a pencil. Story 41. Every job. Consider inflation, tax rates, and the cost of living. We have all been getting screwed for the past 50 years, except for corporate executive jobs, of course. Story 42. Cooks work in high-risk environments. Physical and mental fatigue are a way of life. Getting hurt on the clock is expected despite precautions. Cooks need to be able to multitask in high-stress and uncomfortable environments and are expected to do so for hours on end without sitting or taking a break. Cooks handle hazardous materials, spoiled foods, allergens, and dangerously hot substances and equipment. Cooks need to be able to master multitasking, time management, and portion control. Cooks are vital mechanists in our social experiences. They help make the meals that make memories. I'm not saying that being a cook is a six-figure salary, but are they vastly underpaid? Yes. $13 to $17 an hour to start with no benefits aside from family meal and a shift drink is unfair. This job is easily and handily worth a comfortable wage. For your information, I live in West Virginia, and SmartAsset has an hourly wage of $37.88 marked as necessary for a single person to afford necessities and long-term goals.